You're watching Nihil Goat. Happy Spooktober. Yeah!
One of my earliest memories is waking up to a weird feeling. In the beginning, it wasn't very often, maybe once a week, but then it started occurring more and more. Multiple nights a week, I would wake up with this weird feeling that I was being watched, and whatever it was, it just didn't feel friendly. It was some time before he ever showed himself to me, but for months I would wake up so often it just became part of my usual routine. Then one week, the feeling just stopped. I could finally go back to sleeping through the night. Then it happened. One night, I wake up to the feeling of being watched. But this time, it was different. As I opened my eyes, I noticed it was darker than usual, much colder than usual, and my eyes were drawn to the doorway at the foot of my bed. That's when I saw him, standing there in the doorway watching me, a tall, dark, skinny figure with disproportionate limbs, very lanky and eerie looking. The only thing that I can compare him to in my adult life would be the Hat Man. Same build, same structure, only completely blacked out. It felt like time froze as my gaze locked upon him. After what seemed like an eternity, he vanished before my eyes, fading away into the darkness. Somehow, even against the blackness of the back room, he still stood out. He was somehow darker. No sounds could be heard. It was like I went deaf while he was there. I didn't dare move. I just screamed. As you can probably expect, it was written off as a child's nightmare or my imagination. After that, things went quiet for a while. It wasn't until high school that I even saw the shadow again. In my adult life, he seemed to have just disappeared altogether. When I was very little, my family moved into an old 2-story house. Things were creepy from day one. The vibe felt melancholy and grim from the second you walked in the door. Come to find out, it was a Civil War boarding house. Oh joy. It started small. Walking sounds in the halls and on the stairs, items being misplaced, animals acting funny, the normal things. Then it started getting weird. I had weird dreams about this time and would wake up crying most nights. One night, it got scary. I was pushed down a flight of stairs, complete with handprints on my back and all. My parents made me sleep in the living room for a while after that. They never told me why either. Every night in the living room, I would watch shadows walk around. My parents told me it was just a dream, but I knew there was something there. They finally let me sleep upstairs in my bedroom again, but the activity didn't stop. For a couple of nights, there were no noises or shadows. Then out of nowhere, when my cousins and I were playing, I saw my first full-blown apparition. It burned into my head. A young man in tattered brown pants, no shirt, chains on his wrist, crying profusely with his hands reaching towards his neck, as if he was asking me for help. I froze. I stared into his eyes, and for the first time in my life, I came face to face with the afterlife. I was terrified, but I couldn't speak. After what seemed like hours, I finally broke my gaze, and I looked at my cousin and I said, "I think he's choking," and pointed towards him. By the time we all looked, he had disappeared. It wasn't my imagination. I felt his fear. He was scared as I was, but he felt safe enough to appear to me. I'll never know why. I didn't want to sleep in my bed after that, but I didn't want to be back downstairs with shadows either. So I stayed. It was a big regret too. About a week later, I was in my bed about to go to sleep. I got up to turn off my TV. For reference, it was a big old CRT that the power button had broke on, so you had to use a screwdriver to press the actual switch inside. As I got back into bed, it turned on, and I noticed it was eerily cold at this point. Well, I got up and turned it back off. The second time I laid in bed, something called me to look down the hallway. Standing in my bathroom door, there were two soldiers, illuminated by some otherworldly light. Their dead gray eyes stared directly at me, one of them holding his rifle firmly in his hand, bayonet and all. Their gray outfits adorned with brass buttons and tilted caps stuck out so much that to this day I remember every detail. The pack on the other's back held his sleeping roll and a pot hanging from it. I screamed bloody murder and hid under the sheets. When my parents got to me, there was nothing there. Even now, they just tell me I had a nightmare, but I know what I saw and I felt. We moved from the house shortly after that. But even people that lived there after us still experienced things and reported it. Vacuums flying out of closets, every door in the house opening, and an old lady screaming at people. The house got burned down by some teens in the early 2000s. I was able to see it one last time in its burned state. The entire upstairs was gone, but somehow that staircase survived. I'm convinced there was something in that staircase. Horror movies always have a creepy little girl. What they don't tell you is just how bone-chilling they really are. Growing up, I always laughed at the stereotype in movies, but when I was a teenager, I came face to face with one. It started as simply appearing in dark corners of the room, always late at night, and she always just stood there silently. But the sight sent chills down my spine. But it was never much more than that. Still, it was rather scary. Over time, I just started to ignore her, hoping that she would just go away. But then she started appearing in my dreams, and I always got the same creepy feeling from it. But again, I chose to ignore it. I feel like that was where I made the mistake. She started to do little things like move objects when I lay them down, make little noises, and just all around trying to show that she was there and will not be ignored. When those attempts didn't work, she found a way to get my attention. As I was lying in bed one night with my headphones in, just listening to music and thinking as I always did, the bed began to shake. It started as a small shake, just barely noticeable, but it grew stronger and stronger until even through the music I could hear the frame cracking against the wall. You're here, I get it. Duly noted. I obviously didn't get much sleep that night. I just kept replaying it in my head, trying to find a logical reason why it happened. To this day, I believe this is as close to poltergeist activity as I have ever gotten. Over the coming weeks, I tried to make sure to sleep as early as possible or just stay up all night and crash in class the next day. She grew quiet and over time just disappeared. I thought I was in the clear, but I couldn't have been more wrong. Fast forward to years later and I'm watching TV late at night in my own house. Everything grew cold and the house felt wildly uneasy. My cat's hair stood on her back and she started growling and pacing the house like she was looking for something, just visibly upset. I just ignore her thinking she heard a mouse. It was an old house after all. And I try to get ready for bed. As soon as my head hit the pillow, I hear a jarringly loud sound. It eerily sounds like the closet in the living room, which the door had swollen over the years and had gotten stuck, so every time you opened it, it made a loud crack. I knew the noise, and I also knew that I was home alone that night. So I threw on every light in the house and grabbed a weapon and started searching. Nothing. Not a speck of dust had even been moved. Both me and the cat both heard it. I say fuck it and try to go to bed. That's when it happened. I lay in bed and look up towards the TV and there she was, standing in the corner, surrounded by a darkness that the light from the TV couldn't even penetrate. This time was different. Her eyes were like a piercing white that glowed. It was like she wanted me to know that she's there and she's not going anywhere. She would not be forgotten. Since then, I haven't seen or experienced anything, but not a day goes by that I don't think about it. When looking for somewhere to live as a young couple, spirits weren't exactly the first things on our minds to ask about. Upon first seeing the house, it felt warm and inviting, like home. Even after moving in, nothing seemed strange. At the time, I worked third shift, so I typically stayed up rather late on my nights off. This was when I started noticing things. A wisp of haze in the kitchen, footsteps, the usual suspects. But it didn't feel malicious at all, almost as if it was just a memory playing out day after day. After talking with the landlord, I found out that the house was owned by an older man, and his daughter stayed really close by just to keep a watch for him. He was a bit of a handyman, and he even built the porch on the house by himself. But he never wanted to leave. He lived out his days here. And that's when I learned that he still remains, walking throughout the house, never to bother anyone. No one that had lived here had ever reported anything strange or malevolent, nothing more than footsteps. And this is how it stayed for a while. So long he became more background noise. One night, I was laying in bed half asleep, my ex asleep beside me. The room was cold, colder than I had ever felt it before. Suddenly I heard a deep wake up loudly in my ear. I bolted up from the bed, searching the room for who said it. I even woke her up, and she asked me why I told her to wake up. I was like, I didn't. The color drained from her face. It was so loud that it had echoed off of the walls, full reverb bouncing around. Shaken but knowing I needed to sleep, I begrudgingly decided to say fuck it and just go back to bed. Nothing else happened, and I was able to doze off. Thinking nothing else of it with a further lack of activity, I just go on with my life. Then suddenly, things start to disappear around the house. And I mean really disappear. I would search the entire house, every inch of it, only for the item to be in a spot that it would, nor should, ever be, even places that I'd already checked. Annoying, but still somewhat playful. Still nothing to worry about. Around this time, I started noticing early mornings that you would hear conversations between an old man and a lady in the house very faintly. No matter where you go in any room, it always sounded like it was right on the other side of the wall. Never clear enough to even understand a single word of it. After switching jobs and being home at night more, it seemed the old man was irritated by me being here. Things started to feel a bit more tense. Items flying off walls, doors slamming, aggressive stomping. I started to feel unwanted in my old home. Time to go back to an old tradition, sage. I spent weeks on end smudging my house and doing different things to try to calm down the feeling some, but it hit a climax. Nothing physical ever happened. It's always when I'm asleep. While I wouldn't call them nightmares, the past couple years of my dreams have always been the same. I'm trapped in this house and I can't leave. The overbearing sense of fear that someone's coming, even during lucid dreams. I can't leave. It's like he's telling me I'm trapped in here with him and I'll never make it out. If you were expecting a positive outcome to this story, like I found a better place and moved out, you won't get it. The scariest part of the story is, I still live here, and it's getting worse. An update to this story. After finishing the script, I went to bed feeling a bit uneasy. When I woke up for work, I did my usual routine and turned the air off. As I stood in the bathroom brushing my teeth, listening to the TV, the air turned itself back on. Why is it weird? The unit has a dial to turn it back on. And the setting was a few clicks away from off. It couldn't have done it by itself. It's like he knows I'm talking about him.